that. But before we start, let me bore you all with my latest semi-comprehension of important things. Right. Why are young people screwed up? I think after 70 years of self-analysis, I understand why. It is because when the human growth spurt starts, the adolescent growth spurt starts, all the bones of the body start to grow. You get longer legs and things like that. But your skull also grows. And the brain inside has to adapt to fit a new, bigger box. And it's partly growing, but very much a question of reaccommodating itself inside. And that doesn't happen overnight. It happens roughly between the ages of 24 and 26. Now, the last two areas that grow, that enter their fine adult form, are areas around the prefrontal cortex that relate to judgment and a sense of proportion. And the amygdala, which is the sort of source and seat of raw emotions, fear, anger, despair, and all those things. So it's really not much point in talking to a 14-year-old boy and saying, why, for a dare, did you jump off the Golden Gate Bridge? Didn't you realize that it wasn't a smart thing to do? The answer is, of course, no, because he hasn't got the brain into a sort of position and in a condition where he can make judgments. And I think the consequences of this are very interesting, because, of course, what we tend to do with these young people that we now know from observation and science have no judgment. We allow them to drive, we allow them to marry, we allow them to vote, and at the age of 21 we allow them to drink. In England it's about 15. So here's my thesis. We now know that adolescence lasts a lot longer than we ever did believe. And perhaps we as a society ought to be caring for our adolescents far better and for far more intensively than we ever did before. And that will really, it's a real pain in the butt, because let me tell you, as a parent, you really hope that by the time they're 18, they're off your hands and you don't have to worry anymore. Let me tell you, as a parent of a 45-year-old, a 43-year-old, and an 8-year-old, you never stop worrying about them. But if those of you who are 26 plus or 30, just look back now on the daft things that you were doing a few years ago. Do you see any difference in your behavior, in your sense of judgment? Because it isn't a question of well, of course, I'm very mature for my years or anything like that. It is quite simply the brain isn't ready yet. And if we believe that, and I think the evidence is there, though I'm perfectly prepared to change my opinions with new facts for medical people there, we really ought to be looking at things the way we do things differently. Because there's far too many child suicides, depression, and things like that. And just to throw in one other thing, the cannabis debate. When I was at university, we all believed the wacky tobacco did you no harm at all. Mind you, the wacky tobacco that we smoked was a 30th or a 40th of the strength of what's available to you guys. Now, if you think of that cascade, that sequential cascade of chemical reactions that's taking place within each cell as it adapts to this, as it basically shifts the brain around inside the new box. The last thing that you would want to be doing would be to add psychotropic drugs, or cannabinoids, into those equations. I think the consequence of what we know about the way the brain develops means that we really have to be far more cautious about letting young people experience drugs. If I suddenly decided that wacky tobacco was a new way of life for me now, you could measure the drop in my intelligence, and it would only be about 1 or 2 IQ points. And when I gave up, it would bounce back. Because I'm an old man, I'm well over the age of 30. But if there's something called the Dunedin longitudinal study about, they've been following people born in 1971, 72 in New Zealand. And the consequences of early drug use are really horrifying. And we're talking about 8 to 10 IQ points lost permanently. That, you might as well just stick a hot poker in their brains and scramble it around for a bit. So, I suppose this is a sort of old man's remonstrance or plea or cautionary note that I put out to you today, just because I wanted to talk about it, that's all. Now we can talk about other things if you like.